and get to our announcements, and then we can move on, see who gets here. So just quick reminders for any professionals who want continuing education. Texas is requiring that you use your real name as your Zoom identity, that you were here with your camera on for the entire time, and that you complete the session evaluation. Then we will put the link in the chat at the end of the session. Okay, so we are recording this. We generally stop recording when it's time for Q&A, just to make sure that we're protecting everyone's information. And yeah, I think that's all of our announcements. It's old hat by now. So let me introduce to you our lovely speakers. Maria is an experienced educator and school librarian who is passionate about trauma-informed teaching and centering adoptees in the classroom. As a librarian, she feels providing resources to adoptees and their families that center adoptee voices is essential. And Carolina identifies as an adoptee Latina, veteran educator, and adoptive mom. She is providing her young adopted son with opportunities and knowledge that she wishes she had as a child. I will hand it over to you, ladies.
Thank you, and welcome to our session. We'll start sharing our screen and then we'll kick it off.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, sure. So welcome to Book Talks, Adoption in KidLit. We're so happy to see you all here. And we want to let you know that there'll be lots of times for you to, if you have a question, to raise your hand in the chat. We're really happy to have like more interactive conversation with y'all. So this is Book Talks, Adoption in KidLit, where we're going to share some of our favorite books that we have looked at, curated, and read, that we find appropriate or approved is the word I want to say, that fit for us. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, no, I
Okay.
think you can know.
So my name is Carolina, and I am adopted from Colombia. I have lived my most of my life with my white adoptive family that lives in the North Shore of Boston, where we are speaking from. I have been an educator for 19 years and librarian for 2. And we're going to talk a little bit in the future about, or in the couple next slides. But I was raised with maybe one book about adoption, and was given the book, and here you go. Here's to explain your entire life. And it was a very strange book. So we're really, both of us, I think I can speak for both of us, that we're really passionate in finding books where people have voices, whether it's adopted voices, or people of color, BIPOC people. So that's who I am.
Hi, my name is Maria Valiente. I go by Mari. I am a Guatemalan adoptee, and in reunion found out that I am a Guatemalan Belizean adoptee. And I am an educator. I was a 5th grade teacher for about 5 years, and in the past 3 years transitioned into a librarian role. And we will talk, I guess we'll talk about it more in our next slide. But this is our amazing team that we got to work together with for a whole 2 years. And so many of us are connected by adoption. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about how this project came to be.
Well, I actually was working at this school as a teacher for several years, and then Mari came like 4 years ago, but our paths never really crossed. So it's really funny that once we found out that we were both adoptees and transracial adoptees in this small kind of community in Boston, being adoptees, I'm sure we had our trust issues at first. but we quickly bonded, lots of trauma bonding, but also our love for books and educating and the kids. So I don't really know how it started, but we both talked about like, oh, look at this book. Ugh, kind of as we're going through the books, and I'm not going to read that one. Well, I'm not reading that one. And then we just were like, why do we even have these books in the library? And our supervisor was like, let's pull them. You guys are the ones, you are with that, owning that as adoptees. So pull them if you feel strongly, and we have to replace them. So what are we going to replace them with? So we started pulling the books that we felt were inappropriate for our perspectives, and researching books and really wanting to find adoptee authored books, like I said, BIPOC, and we found some that we want to share with you. You want to add on to our why?
No, I think you hit all the why. The only thing I'll add is that we really pulled all the books available in our library, and we are incredibly privileged and resourced in our library. And we were really surprised by like the lack of quality adoptee literature that we had, as coming from a library that has incredible resources. And we also serve many adoptees and adoptive families in our communities. And so knowing that libraries are places where people should be able to come to get resources and balance perspectives and multiple perspectives, we just felt that this was a really important project for us to take on. So we spent part of our year together, in addition to all the other things we do, curating our adoptee literature collection in our library.
Yeah, it was a labor of love for sure. Lots of books out there.
All right, so we're going to show you kind of some of the examples that we had as kids.
I was like excited that I found this book. I don't know if anybody's seen this book. I'm not sure what everyone's relationship and why you're here. But this is the book on the bottom, the one that says Chosen Baby, which was given to me by my parents. And I think we said it was published in the 40s. And I am not that old. And it is about a white family who cannot have a baby naturally, so they adopt, and they have to wait, and then they get this perfect baby, and everything is perfect. And ironically, their names are like Mr. and Mrs. White, I believe. And the social worker's name is like Mrs. Brown. You just really can't make that up. And that was the book that was given to me. And I remember like being a little girl and just looking at that book, maybe not even being able to read, and kind of like really attached to that book because maybe it had the word adoption, and it was my only connection with adoption. That we didn't really talk about adoption in my family. And yet at the same time, not connecting whatsoever to the story, to these characters. So it was a very like kind of toxic connection that I had with this book, because I would often go to it seeking some sort of answers, which of course it never gave me. So that was the book on the bottom, The Chosen Baby, that you can now find like on eBay if you're so intrigued.
So I had the book at the top, Why Was I Adopted? And I honestly really don't remember it at all. I know that it's still out there and still floating around there, but I think it was definitely like an 80s, 90s book. And then in our explorations, we found this book called Mother Bridge of Love, that we felt like had there's probably a better word out there, but we'll be transparent. We felt like it was a bit of a fetishizing of adoption.
There's little girls from China, so it's a transracial story, and there was this very uncomfortable feeling of this exoticness that we were very uncomfortable with, and that is a common thread, a common storyline. So.
And we've done this presentation before, but we've done it before with like, here are all the ones like we don't like. And for this presentation, we just decided to get rid of that portion because there are just so many incredible books that are coming out there that we really just wanted to highlight. all of the books that we really do like, and that there are more to come. So before we launch in, does anyone have any questions? I also realized for our moderators, like we can't see the chat. So feel free to like let us know if someone's in the chat, because I don't know why, but we can't see it.
It's just Zoom, and that's not a problem at all.
Perfect. Thank you.
I mean, I do want the list of books you don't like eventually, but
We can provide that for you. So just we'll keep going, but if, like as I said earlier, if you have any questions or comments, throughout, please just let the moderators know and we will happily pause. Because like I said, we really are hoping to have a conversation.
All right, so we're ready to launch in. We're basically going to talk about a bunch of books. We're going to start with early childhood, the lower, like the early picture books, because that is Catalina's. When she was a librarian in our library, she worked with pre-K through 2. And then we'll work our way up. I work with the upper division students in 5 through 8. And yeah.
I'm sorry, I just want to ask a quick question. Like, do we have, are we sharing our slides or?
I think we will.
I just didn't want people, you don't have to like take notes, or I just wanted you to just sit back and enjoy. So you don't have to, we can provide a list so that you can just sit back and enjoy our book recommendations. Okay, so I think I'm up first.
No, it's okay.
Okay. So this book is called Eyes That Weave the World's Wonders. It's written by Joanna Ho and Liz Kleinrock. This book just came out this year in 2024. This is definitely one of our favorite books. We're very lucky that we have met Liz Kleinrock. She's an adoptee from Korea, so she's a transracial adoptee. So number one, that adoptees.
I'm sorry, are you sharing your screen? I think I lost the, okay, if Gail sees it, then I just have to find the window again. So sorry.
It's okay.
We're good.
As I was saying, this is an adoptee's voice from her perspective. And one of the things that we noticed about some of the other books were a lot of them were adopted parents' perspective on their children. And this is first voice. So that's great. She's, as I said, from Korea, so BIPOC author. The illustrations are just, beautiful. So it's just this like this union of the two coming together. We just both thought it was really beautiful. And when we were privileged to have Liz Kleinrock read it aloud to us at a conference, and we both were, I mean, there was not a dry eye in the house. So this adoptee grows up and wondering about herself and exploring why her eyes look different than everybody else in the family. Family reunions, all the photographs. So she's just kind of exploring. That's the cover title, Eyes That Weave the World's Wonder. We also like this book because the author, Liz Kleinrock, is an educator. And so in the back of the book, she has several resources and notes about adoption. So, you're not, if you're just kind of starting this world, there's a lot of information. So we thought it was great. And just the representation of the two cultures was woven in beautifully. There's also one of my favorite pages in there is a page about the birth mother. Another thing that we're not so excited about is a lot of these adoption stories remove the birth mother's voice. And that's huge to have the birth mother a part of the story. So there's a page in here where she's kind of dreaming of what her world would be like in Korea, and she's picturing her Korean mom, and it's gorgeous. So the representation for us was huge in this book. So this went top of the list for us. Eyes That Weave the World's Wonder by Joanna Ho and Liz Kleinrock. They've done many things together, and also Jung Ho is such an amazing illustrator. She's done a lot of other really cool books, so check her out. This book is called Adoption is Both by Elena Hall. Is Elena Hall also an adoptee?
Yep,
I can't remember. So there we have this adoptee voice again as the author representation there. I really liked this book because at the time when we were researching this, I had a 5-year-old who's now 6, or maybe he was 4. I don't know. This book is a little bit more for a younger age. So I really like that for my son to have access to. Another reason I personally love this book is because in the title it says adoption is both. It is not, you're not putting on rose-colored glasses to read this book. Adoption is wonderful, the end. There's an and here, and that's very apparent on all the pages, that you can experience happiness in your family and you can experience loss and trauma at the same time. And the way they have spoken about that and written about that for a young child, it's completely age appropriate. I read it to my son, and it's great. And the pictures are just really simple. So we both recommend this book.
Yeah. I think another note to say about this one, I think it's from a smaller publisher.
Mhm.
So even though you can get it in most places, I believe like Amazon, it makes a big difference to support a small publisher or someone who kind of publishes their own book. And I think that's what Elena Hall did.
This is another one called Being Adopted by Amy Wilkerson. Pictures by Erin Kim and Caleb Yee. The author is adopted and Caleb Yee is adopted. I'm not sure about Erin Kim. This is another and situation. The author goes through pages of what the experience is like. As you can see in the front cover, there's a full heart and a broken heart. This is, a little bit more, the words are a little bit stronger than in the other book, but again, completely appropriate. Again, my son approves of this book. We have it in our library as well. Amy Wilkerson is also well known, as a licensed social worker. So there's a lot of great information in this book about how an adoptee is feeling. And again, it's from the adoptee's point of view, which is just so huge for us. It's not about even the whole family. It's about how this one adoptee is feeling about their experience, their feelings, their emotions. There's a lot of great representation in here too. There's BIPOC families, there's same-sex couples, single parents in here. So I really like that exposure for everybody that can see that. There's not one way to make a family. So families look different, and I'm not even talking about adoption. I'm just talking about the grown up. So I really like that representation in this book as well. So this book, almost like we couldn't really decide to include this book, but I'm glad we did. It's called A is for Always, an Adoption Alphabet. This is a local illustrator, and that's how we knew about this book. It has beautiful pictures in it. It's animals, and it goes through the alphabet of different words that might be associated with adoption. It's rhyming, like I said, it's an alphabet book. Everything is very happy. What I didn't love about it was that it was animals. The animals are feeling loved or not loved. The animals are going through these emotions. For me personally, I would much rather see, and I'm hoping someday there'll be more authored books with the same idea with people. I know young children like animals, but it's not, when we're talking about adoption and there is so much sadness and trauma with it, you can't make a book that's going to be super happy. So I felt like a little bit confused with this book in that way, but I'm still going to give it, a thumbs up. We're still presenting it because it does have some nice words in there that children do need to hear. And if some people are going to hear that and understand that through animals than with people, then great. I do want people to understand what's going on. So that was really my only.
I think I'm the one who because we would sit and talk about each book, and
Yeah.
I'm the one who you didn't like it, and I pushed back on it a little bit because there is, B for birth mom, and there was a page celebrating and acknowledging the birth mom, as well as towards the end, I cannot remember what letter it was associated with. It may have been S for story, but giving the little koala, who is the adoptee, agency over telling their story when they felt ready and in their time. So I remember really liking those two pages, but I also felt completely in agreement with Catalina that our hope is that if you're looking for an idea to publish a story, you can publish an alphabet adoption book that represents children that would be maybe able to better connect with the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Adoption is a lifelong journey. This is written by a few people. You can see all the authors below. These authors are from the Boston Post Adoption Resources, which is here in Brookline. It's a organization that deals with therapy and groups of therapy. I'm a client, and they're awesome. They know their stuff. And so Kelly D. Bendito started this project with the years of experience of dealing as a trauma-informed clinician. And this book I also have in my child's library. I like the representation here. I like the realistic wording here, the stories, the and the both, that adoption is hard and that you're going to have questions that are not going to be answered. There's no need in this book to have this happy ending and everything has to be tied up perfectly in this bow. It's realistic and it's not, completely depressing. There's also like a workbook kind of journal thing that you can do in the back of it, which is really nice. And they have other ideas as educators. They also talk about things that might be hard for adoptees, like birthdays, schools, school projects. So I felt like this book was really resourceful. I was really glad to have this book in my library. This book is called The Family Tree by Sean Dixon. And this is a great book because it's about this person who has to do a family tree assignment for their class. And we all can probably relate to that. And as adoptees, the horror that comes with that when we have to do a project like that. Do you want to add more? Because I feel like this book
So she is an adoptee, and I believe she's an older adoptee. And so her family at first is like, they're trying to navigate this family tree project assignment. And then they try to be more expansive with the family tree assignment. So they go to all the different adults and people in her life who have shaped who she is as an adoptee. So there's foster care representation. I believe she has a biological sister who's living in a different household. There is like caregivers, like people who support her outside of the home, her biological mom. And so by the end, she has an illustration of like a community instead of just a family tree for her assignment. And it is like a fold out at the back of the book. This was another one that I had like mixed feelings about at first because I wasn't sure really how to process it, but I do think it's a great resource, especially if that family tree assignment comes or in advance of that coming someone's way, or if that comes a child's way in your life. All right. Let's see. All right, so this one is, we're starting to move into our middle grade books. So these are like 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, like, maybe range of like 8 years old to like 11 or 12 years old. And this is written in verse. It's by a Puerto Rican author. It's also written in letters to her parents. This is Laura, and we meet her in the midst of a transition from living with her family to family services taking her to live with an aunt. So it's kind of a kinship care situation. And she's, processing. I love this author, Andrea Beatriz Arango, because she writes about grief and processing hard things really well, especially for children of this age group. And she actually comes to writing this book with experience as a foster care parent. And Laura finds this dog, this lost puppy, that she decides that she wants to train as a service dog so that she can reunite with her family. And so that's her mission. I think that this book does a great job talking about grief and the complexities of grief. Yeah, this is a great book. I don't know what else to say that.
I'll just add that middle grades are one of my favorite genres as well. You don't have to be in fourth grade. I love this book too.
Yes, anyone can read this book.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, so Mari as a middle school librarian has introduced me to a lot of middle-aged books that I just loved. This is another one, For Black Girls Like Me by Mariam J. Lockington, who's also an adoptee. This story, she's a transracial adoptee, and we both read the book a while ago, so we were like, wait, we couldn't remember one part. She has a sister. We couldn't remember if her sister is white or black, which does make a difference in a transracial family. But what happens is they move to a new home. She's in high school, maybe like
No, I
ninth
think
grade.
she's in the end of middle school. So
Okay,
she's like
okay.
in the 8th
She's
grade.
in that, teen area of wanting to belong. And they move to a new school and find out that their dad is working a lot. The mom actually has a lot of severe mental illness. So there is a lot going on for her in this book, trying to find out who she is, dealing with, trying to become, the adult in her family, taking care of her mom. So there's a lot happening, and like as I said, it's just a pivotal time for her, experiencing and noticing differences. There is some sadness in this book for sure, but it's really appropriate. It's really great book. So she has also written, the author has written this book, Forever Is Now, which I have not read.
This one is a Schneider Family Book Award, so it won an award for how she writes about mental health. And though the main character is not an adoptee and it's like adoptee authored, she has her supporting characters one of her supporting characters is an adoptee, and I think that's another really important thing to consider in books that are written, is that sometimes authors write supporting characters that are adoptees, or sometimes authors write orphans or adoptees as like a trope. And that can be damaging if it's not done thoughtfully and well and with sensitivity readers. And I think that's really great that Mariama J. Lockington is no longer just writing, like, I think this book, For Black Girls Like Me, was her as an adoptee needing to write that book for herself. And now she's still getting to write all these other stories that are really important to her, that aren't just centered around adoption, but still have really great adoption representation for kids who might not want to read a book about adoption. So, yeah.
Oh my gosh, I really need it.
All right. This book is called I Can Make This Promise by Christine Day. She's Upper Skagit Indigenous, belongs to an Indigenous community in the Pacific Northwest. And this book is also middle grade, written at a really developmentally appropriate level, exploring the kind of impact of what adoption has, specifically Indigenous adoptions have a generation later. So this is a young girl, Edie, who is really aware that her mom is raised in a white family, but that her mom had an Indigenous family before that, and is starting to get to that middle grade age where she's got lots of questions about who she is and where she comes from and how she identifies. And it's also written from like a mystery lens. She finds a box of letters and photos in like an attic and starts kind of trying to piece together her family story. And it's really beautiful. All right, this is Tumble by Celia C. Perez. This was a Pura Belpre Honor book in 2023. What I really like about this book is that Addie, she lives in New Mexico. She lives with her mom. She has a stepfather, and the beginning of the book is that her stepfather has proposed adopting her. And that sparks her interest in kind of finding out more about her biological father and her family history. And come to find out, her father is a famous luchador, which is a wrestler in their town. And so she starts connecting with the wrestlers on that side of her family. I also love this book because it's a very feminist read. So all of the luchadores in her family are also women. And then ultimately, when she makes her decision at the end of the book about whether or not she would like to be adopted by her stepfather, the adults are very transparent in their language with her as a middle grade student. And they also really respect her decision, which I think was really great that she's given a lot of agency in this story. Okay. This is Mark Oshiro, and I'm like highly recommending that everyone keep an eye out for everything that they write, because they're starting to kind of make it big in the publishing world. They recently wrote The Sun and the Star with Rick Riordan, who's a famous like fantasy author at this age group. And these first two books, You Only Live Once, David Bravo, and Into the Light, are very much like Mark Oshiro's opportunity to write out their adoption stories for kids of different ages. So You Only Live Once, David Bravo is middle grade, and Into the Light is young adult and definitely a heavier read. In You Only Live Once, David Bravo, he's given another school assignment about his heritage, but this time it is a fellow student who makes a comment about their heritage and being adopted, and that they like are not sure how to grapple with and respond to, and it actually sends them on a time warp where they relive the day over and over and over again until they can kind of get their feet under them to have agency over their story and figure out how to navigate this situation. And then Into the Light is a really heartbreaking story and a mystery, and written in a really cool, unique way. It is a teen boy who has been adopted into a very religious group, into a church group, and then is ultimately kicked out for being queer. And there's a mystery of that there has been a body found on the grounds of the church group. So they're trying to kind of secretly get back into figure out if the body is the body of their adopted sister who they left behind when they left that church group. And Mark Oshiro also talks about how that book was informed, even though it's fictional, from a lot of their experiences. And then lastly, Wild Tongues Cannot Be Tamed is an anthology of Latinx stories. And I really like how the first story in there is written by Mark Oshiro and how they think about their Latinx identity as an adoptee. So all three are incredible. All right. Do you want to talk about where we come from? Or
Yeah. So this author, Shannon Gibney, is one reason I love her, and I had this book on my TBR list for a long time. She's just incredibly active. If you're on Instagram, I highly recommend you follow her, and she's really outspoken. So I was really excited when this book came out. The Girl I Am was and never will be last year. I had read this as an anthology, a poem anthology, Where We Come From. And I had actually shared that with my class, a couple of poems from there. So I'll let Mari talk a little bit more about this actual book, but she's really a great advocate and talks about adoption very clearly, raw, but in an appropriate way.
So this book is both a memoir, and every adoptee or person who is separated from their family sometimes has this question, or we feel like we have this question of like, who would I be if I was not removed from the situation, or if I lived this different life? And she writes that into her own reality. So she has her memoir, which is supported by primary source documents of like her birth certificate, like medical records, photos and things like that. And then parallel to that, she has an imagining of what her life would be like if she were not adopted. So this is another really cool book that was written in a form that I've never seen before, which I thought was really amazing. See No Color was her first book about a biracial adoptee, very much like a coming of age, who am I story. And then Where We Come From is a picture book of poetry in the I Am From style poems. And I really like Where We Come From because even though 2 out of the 4 authors are adoptees, you would never really know unless you went and did digging on their backgrounds and on their stories. And I think that that's like so validating for their experiences and for any reader who reads that, because I think we often feel like we're bridging so many different worlds and we're not enough, Latina or not enough, white enough, or whatever it is, in terms of identities. And so I think that the authors did a beautiful job with the Where We Come From. All right, these are all my people, young adult. I think that this book is going to win. If it hasn't already, I think it's going to win some awards this year. This is like my favorite book of the past few months about adoption. It's called The Great Cool Ranch Dorito in the Sky by Josh Galarza. And I don't often see books of high school boys who are interrogating what it means to be adopted. And I would say it's not even something that like hits you over the head. He's an adoptee who's processing the loss of his adoptive mother to cancer. And so he's got a lot of boy humor, like it's high school boy written. So there is like language and profanity and things that, he's processing. He's processing this through an eating disorder as well. So while there's like lots of humor, there's lots of intensity. And it is beautifully written, it's heartbreaking. And a lot of the other reviews that I've seen of it, people loved it. It still was like a necessary read. So I hope to see more from Josh Galarza as well.
This book is called Monstrous, and it's written by Sarah Meyer. This book is really shocking. It's a graphic novel, and so I really love graphic novels, and how that's a whole new genre for me that started when I became a librarian. When I was younger, I thought graphic novels were Calvin and Hobbes, or just comic books. Didn't know that there could be so much depth in a graphic novel, and obviously I related to this so much as a transracial adoptee. So in the imagery in this book, Sarah Meyer really, I feel like really out goes beyond. And there are a lot of pictures and scenes. I mean, there are a couple that I remember just closing the book and just kind of holding it to my heart and just like taking a breath, because that was really powerful. One of the things I love about graphic novels is how much meaning can be delivered through pictures. And so to feel that connected to a picture book, I mean, it's not a picture book, a graphic novel, but to a picture, I just thought that was outstanding. I think Sarah did an amazing job. Sarah is a transracial, in this book, is a transracial adoptee. It's, what did we decide the word was? It is a book about their story, but
it's like a coming of age and their like memoir. It's kind of like a memoir, but it's really focused on like elementary, teen, high school, and finding their.
Yeah, again, it's the story of finding, a lot in these middle young adults, it's in that age of finding themselves and thinking about their identity, just as we all have done. But when you're adopted and when you're transracially adopted, it just brings it to a whole new level. So Sarah has a lot of issues at home fitting in, obviously, definitely at school fitting in, and looks at themselves, like this front cover is just amazing, as a monster, that they don't fit in, that they are ruining the family, they're ruining friendships. As a graphic novel, obviously it's a quick read as well, but I was blown away by this book. It's sad and it's amazing at the same time.
Something to add as a librarian, I just had this thought, is that like, parents will come in and ask us for, books with Black representation or Latinx representation or queer representation, and we can pull like multiple books now, or Indigenous representation. And when you think about coming in and, okay, graphic novels, with adoptee representation, We have Palimpsest before this one that came out, but this is one of our more recent. But this is when I think about adoptee representation in graphic novel form, I think like, oh, I can only think of two. And so there's still such a need for this. And Sarah Meyer did all the illustrations and everything themselves. So it's just like really incredible to have this story and this book in your hands. This is the book that you mentioned earlier called When We Become Ours by Shannon Gibney and Nicole Chung. And we just love both of them.
Yes.
They're both just really trying to amplify the voices of adoptees and support adoptee authors. And I think that's essentially what they did with this anthology. This is very much a young adult anthology. It's a compilation of stories from all different genres. So it's, science fiction, graphic novel, it's realistic fiction, stories about, going to heritage camps, or, there's a story about, this girl who's sneaking out to go to like an HBCU, Black Student Union, like party. And that's like one of the first times that she feels really seen. There's like a sci-fi dystopian, like world building of I'm gonna go, kill this person who oppressed me. So wild stories in there. And at the same time, one of the trigger warnings for this book is that there's so many themes of suicidality and depression and the heavy feelings that adoptees hold. And it's hard to imagine some of these heavy books that we've talked about, like for children, and yet we really feel that for each of the age groups that we've recommended so far, that the authors have written them really well for the age group. Yeah, anything else about this one?
It's because it's an anthology. Again, it can be read pretty quickly because, it's just story after story. So as a busy mom, I like those kind of books a lot. So I really would recommend this book a lot.
Okay, this one was one that surprised me. I did not go into reading this with an adoptee lens. This is written in verse from the perspectives of 3 generations of women, centering this girl on the main cover who's Mimi, and she doesn't get along with her mom, and she's trying to read her grandmother's poems to try to understand her grandmother's life experience and her mom's life experience. And this is kind of a spoiler alert. I won't give too much away, but it all does connect to adoption and adoption prior to Roe versus Wade. And so that when I picked this up and I actually read this for a feminist read, and I thought that this was more like a feminist, that's why I was drawn to it. And then by the end of it, I was like, it has everything. So that's why we included this one.
Okay, so we're going to move on to some adult books, as we are educators, but also adults, and there are just some really great books that we also recommend for your bookshelf. This book is called We Were Once a Family. It's written by Roxana Escalarin. This is written by a reporter, and it is a true story. Did you get the name of that family?
The Hart family.
The Hart family. I don't know if you have remembered it. It was in the news in the Northwest. A car was found in the water off Cliff Route 1, whatever is over there, with 2 adults and children dead. So this follows the true life story of this. Kind of starts based on this one woman and their quest to have a family. They fall in love, and they're 2 women, so they decide to adopt. And there's a lot of back and forth with background checks on these people, and kind of finding out that maybe they were not best suited to be parents. And again, this is all true. And the author, Roxana, did such an amazing job of doing the research that it reads just like, it's just amazing. There was also what I thought very interesting about this was the family welfare system and the child welfare system, like how that is working and or in this situation completely not working, which is so much a part of the adoption process. And for me, I actually did not know a lot about that. I don't know if that's because I'm from another country, as with a closed adoption, but I thought it was fascinating and obviously incredibly tragic, as this is a true story. And there is, without a spoiler alert, a theme of repetitiveness that happens because adopted children are born with trauma, and that is, if we are not, talking about it and dealing with it, how it can be repeated. So again, very sad, but I'm not sad that I read it, if that makes sense.
Mhm. I also really liked how they had the perspective of the biological family and adoptive family, or not adoptive family, biological family. Like, I think she really intentionally went and got an underrepresented voice and perspective on the story, that when it hit the news in the mainstream that we didn't often hear about. So this one was a powerful one. I think this one also, I can see from everyone's, their comments are starting to pop up.
Yeah.
That this hopefully is getting out there and getting recognized.
Yeah. The next book is called The Girls Who Went Away. This book is written by Ann Fessler, who is an adoptee. This is a little bit of an older book, but I am so glad I read it. Especially because my mom is my adopted mom is from this era of the 50s, 60s. And for me, I just made so many my mom adopted me, but it's talking about girls were her age and the pressure that they felt when they found out they were pregnant, to be, to go away, and to go to these institutes, give birth, and then never talk about it again. So I just kind of remembered thinking about, like, I mean, that did not happen to my mom, but just understanding the way it was, that idea in the 50s of, you get married to a white man, you stay home, you take care of the babies, how that whole idea was just so drilled into people at that age. And I also walked away after reading this book pretty sure that there's not one woman out there that ever wanted to actually relinquish their babies. So that was very sad. But again, it has so many facts. Like, I love documentaries and things like that. So I learned so much. Takes place in the United States. It does talk a little bit about, I think at the end, about some, opening up to other countries because people were really mistreated in this way. And obviously it's before Roe versus Wade. But it's fascinating, and there's many stories. So it's told from the birth mother's perspectives. So that's another thing that I really liked about that, because that's another storyline that we don't hear. So it's just like small story after small story of birth mothers, of their why, and sometimes how they did connect and sometimes how they didn't connect, with their children that they relinquished.
And I love that, Tina, that you said you had to audiobook this one. I didn't audiobook this one, but I feel like sometimes audiobooks make me more emotional. And I can't imagine how impactful and powerful the audiobook must be.
Yeah.
Wow. Going back to these books is bringing back memories.
I know, I'm getting emotional all over again. Nicole Chung, one of our favorite adoptee authors. All You Can Ever Know is her memoir about rediscovering a reunion with her family. She is an amazing author. This book for me just flowed really, really nicely. And just the questions she has. She has a sister who's also adopted. So it was really nice to have, that's an experience that I do have, but my brother and I do not talk openly about our adoption. He's white and adopted from Boston. So I just thought, wow, wouldn't that be so cool to have this experience, to have somebody in your family experiencing the same things. And A Living Remedy came out last year, maybe 2 years ago. This story is about American health system and her parents, and not a spoiler alert, that they are dying, and she moves back, I think, also to the Northwest to care for them, and realizing that, you know, they don't have a lot of money, and the American health system is horrible, and there is a small piece of she really loves her adoptive parents, so of course she wants to do what she can for them. And she does acknowledge that they are her adoptive parents and not her biological parents. So that does play into it, but also, you know, just this feeling of connection with mother and father. And because she's such a beautiful writer, it doesn't really even matter. This book was just so well written. I think I cried at page 1 or page 2. I had already started crying, and I was texting Madi, and I was like, oh no. But again, worth the read. It was really amazing.
Yeah, I think both of these, like All You Can Ever Know was like the first book about an adoptee, like an adoptee experience that I ever read. And then A Living Remedy as well. Like it's just one that I'm not there yet and thinking about an aging parent, but thinking about that and the way that she writes it is so beautiful. Okay, this is your favorite.
This is my favorite of the whole list for adults. The Berry Pickers, of course. Madi brought this book to my attention. It is a novel written by Amanda Peters. It is a fictional story about an Indigenous girl that was technically kidnapped and brought down to Boston. So it takes place in Maine.
Mhm.
And the little girl is brought down to Boston to be raised by this couple, and she is never told that she is adopted. The mother has fertility issues, so and is devastated, and so, you know, just sees this little girl on a rock and just takes her. I like the story because there's 2 stories going on at the same time, so you're like going back and forth between the chapters, which is really great. One is the little girl's biological brother. So they have grown up, and now it's like 25 years without their sister. And he is talking about, you know, what his life, right? This is a fictional story. And there's lots of situations with their life up in Maine, Indigenous family. He has health issues. And then, you know, just traverses back to this girl who's now a young adult, and how she always felt like something was off, you know, like, how come she doesn't actually look like her parents? Why are there no baby pictures of her? She's very suspicious. She goes into the basement, you know, everything is like sealed up and locked up in some papers. There's one woman in her family that knows the truth, and her aunt knows the truth. And she goes visits her aunt one day, and her aunt, you know, has too much to drink and kind of tells her what's happening. And it's just interesting how she faces things that happen in her life. She gets married. So when I think as an adoptee, you know, relationships are really hard. Trust is really hard. Her parents' illness, and then ultimately wanting to find out who actually she is. And so there is this search story, and you're kind of wondering, like, do the 2 stories match up at the end? You know, does the brother get to meet his little sister after 25 years? So I will not tell you the story, but it has gotten a lot of publicity, I'm sorry, about this book. So I love it.
Yeah, I love this one too. And I think this one for me, the reason we added it is it really brings up this question of like adoption. It just resonates throughout the whole book, even though that's not specifically what happened. And then the author is part Mi'kmaq, which is the Indigenous community they're from. And I think she also talks a lot about how like indigeneity and the history of family separation intersect. And so we felt this was appropriate to add to the list.
And I'll just add the Indigenous piece when Madi was just talking about representation. You know, it's just so amazing that we can have books to say, you know, this is like an Indigenous representation current story. So just hearing the different lenses from different people is amazing.
The audiobook is also great.
Yes, I did audio for this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The audiobook is great. All right. This is our
This is
last
our last
slide.
slide. Relinquish has gotten a lot of, I've been seeing it a lot in bookstores, and it's on my TBR list. What's drawn me to this, and again, I haven't read it, but the politics of adoption. I think now in the news with everything that's happening with Korea closing adoptions, and there's just a lot, I think there's another country too, like that's considering closing their,
I think China did as well. China
what did I say, Korea?
No, I think Korea has.
Oh,
I'm
yeah,
sure
yeah,
China
okay,
did
okay.
as well.
Yeah, and I mean, closing their international adoptions. And then the American adoption process, what are actually all of these, closed versus open adoption? So I'm really excited to read this because of the research piece of this for the politics of adoption.
So all of these we chose because they're the ones that kind of have recently come out January 2024. And we kind of saw this big boom of adoptee literature, and it's actually started to kind of decline since January 2024. And in Relinquished, Gretchen Sisson is also a researcher, and she kind of weaves together that when we're thinking about the overturning of Roe versus Wade, and all of these are, as Catalina mentioned, if we think back to the girls that went away, this is like the newest kind of girls that went away. And she does research in terms of like who gets to be a mother and how is adoption becoming a system as a tool for family separation. Adoption Unfiltered is less research-based, but it still amplifies, like, whereas Relinquished is more research-based, Adoption Unfiltered is less research-based, but amplifies the stories of adoptees, birth parents, adoptive parents, and their allies. And they also have a podcast. So it really like melts all those stories together. And then lastly, as a Guatemalan adoptee, Until I Find You has been like the book that I have my nose in, and I can't finish it in one sitting. It's one that I like pick up, put down, pick up, put down, because it's about the adoption industry in Guatemala, which closed in the early 2000s due to the corruption in their international adoption systems. And so it goes into the stories of jaladoras, which were like the women who kind of bridged these relationships between lawyers and birth mothers in many ways through coercion. So those are our last three. And we also wanted to just say that like these lists, the list that we shared so far is like by no means like a comprehensive list of all the books. We know that there are still so many. And then even when we were looking at the sessions last night, we were like, oh, there's so many adoptee authors on this list that we still want to read and check out. So we encourage you to check out the books that are available in the links that were sent out.
Yeah, this is not, the end of the list by any means. We hope that there's going to be a lot of more books centering the adoptee voices or birth mothers' voices. Representation really matters, and often think about if some of these books were around when I was little, how that would have changed for me and for other young children that we do teach at our school. There are a handful of adoptees. So just a sampling, and as I was saying earlier, this is on my list to read. This is on my list because I also cannot get to all of these books. But if you have any questions about any books, or maybe somebody has read any of these books, we would love to hear from you. Open it to the floor.
Yeah, and we can come off this screen too, if that's helpful for any last questions. We knew that we probably wouldn't use all this time at all, and that was our hope, that we wouldn't use all the time. Before I come off the screen for like questions and conversation, just to close it up, we did want to share like our social media and our emails as well. We both try to be active on, like, we're better at kind of more updating our list on social media than we are with, like, I guess that's what we do. We post on social media more, and then we have done this presentation a couple of times now in different forms, and we've done this presentation with like the books that are kind of starting to be outdated, or like, you know, really critically evaluating books, like how to critically evaluate a book as a librarian, as well as just like highlighting the books that we love. And we thought that this would be the right path for us for this time. So
Yeah, I think coming at them as with a librarian lens versus just two people who are adopted lens has been really critical. And so, yeah, as Madi said, I was really proud of when we talk about how to, you know, look at a book critically. So, you know, feel free to like connect with us. We've also included our email addresses. Always happy to, you know, help with any concerns that are going on. If you want to connect further, we would love to do that with you.
yay. So we'll come off here if I can figure that out.